Welcome to Backbone Unlimited. My name is Matt Hartsky. In this episode, we're talking about a reality that every DIY public land archery elk hunter is gonna face at some point: hunting pressured units. If you've hunted public land, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You roll into the trailhead opening morning and the parking lot looks like a small town fair. Trucks lined up, campers tucked into every turnout, and it seems like every direction you glass, you can spot another hunter moving through the timber. Instead of the backcountry solitude you were dreaming about all summer, you're suddenly surrounded by guys bugling, cow calling, and tromping around. Now here's the thing, a lot of hunters throw their hands up at this point. They get frustrated, start thinking there's no way they're gonna call in a bull with all this pressure, and mentally check out before the hunt has even really started. And to be honest, that mindset is why so many guys go home empty-handed from these units. The truth is, pressured elk don't disappear, they adapt. They don't quit eating, they don't quit drinking, and they don't quit breeding in September. What changes is how and when they move and where they feel safe doing it. That means if you're willing to adapt right alongside them, you can still get into elk consistently, even in those units with wall-to-wall trucks and bugles echoing from every drainage. In this episode, I'm going to break down strategies for archery hunting pressured elk on public land. We'll talk about how to keep your mindset sharp when the pressure's high, how to read hunter patterns the same way elk do, where to look for those overlooked hidden hideouts, and how to adjust your calling and movement so you don't just sound like another guy blowing on a bugle tube. This is about separating yourself from the crowd, not by hiking 10 miles deeper than everyone else, even though that is an option, but by hunting smarter, adapting quicker, and thinking like the elk who are living with this pressure every single day. So if you've ever pulled up to a trailhead and thought, well, looks like everybody else had the same idea, stick around, because pressured elk hunting is a chess game, and I'm going to walk you through how to make the right moves. One of the biggest battles you'll fight in a high pressured elk unit isn't against the elk themselves, it's against your own head. The mental side of hunting becomes even more important when there are trucks at every trailhead and bugles echoing from every direction. When you step out of your rig and see a wall of orange flagging tape, boot tracks, and headlamps already moving up the trail, it's easy to feel like you've already lost. Frustration creeps in quick. You start thinking, why did I even bother? These elk are spooked already. That attitude alone has sent more hunters home empty-handed than anything the elk are doing. Elk in pressured units are still elk. They eat, drink, breed, and bed every single day. They don't magically vanish just because more hunters show up. What changes is how predictable they are and how willing you are to adapt. The guys who succeed are the ones who can keep their cool, stay flexible, and see pressure as part of the game instead of an excuse. Think of it like this. Every time you bump into another hunter or hear a bugle you didn't make, you're gathering intel. Instead of throwing your bow on your shoulder and muttering about how crowded it is, use that moment to ask, what's this telling me about the elk? Where are they shifting to get away from all this noise? How can I use this pressure to my advantage? In pressured units, patience is your edge. Too many hunters let pressure push them into frantic decisions, calling louder, hiking faster, bouncing from drainage to drainage because someone else already beat me to it. Elk thrive on that chaos because it gets hunters chasing each other more than the herd. The guy who slows down, observes, and waits for his window is the one who connects. For example, if you're in a spot where every bugle seems to overlap and it feels like a calling contest instead of a hunt, resist the urge to leave immediately. Sit tight, let the pressure burn out, and then move quietly mid-morning. Often you'll find a bull that has slipped away from the noise and regrouped in a quieter pocket. Same pressure, different mindset, completely different outcome. You also have to decide before you step foot on the mountain that you're willing to grind. Pressured units are rarely the kind where a bull screams his head off, runs right in, and gives you a 20-yard broadside shot. More often than not, it's a test of how many times you can get bumped, rerouted, or discouraged before you finally get your break. Most hunters fold early. If you don't, you've already separated yourself. I like to think of pressured hunts as a war of attrition. Elk will keep adjusting, and so will hunters. If you can stay consistent longer than the next guy, you'll get opportunities others miss. That mindset, grit, patience, adaptability, is the number one thing that will set you up for success when pressure is high. Every elk hunter knows how unforgiving the wind can be. If it swirls, shifts, or betrays you, your hunt is done before it starts. Pressure is the exact same way. It's something you have to constantly monitor, understand, and adapt to if you want a chance at success in crowded units. Elk are survival machines. They've evolved to detect and avoid threats, and in pressured units, hunters become just another predator pattern they've learned to recognize. When trucks start stacking up at a trailhead or bugles are echoing from every finger ridge, elk respond in predictable ways. They move earlier or later. Instead of waiting until daylight to head to bedding, they might move hours before legal shooting light. They shift terrain. Elk slide into steeper, thicker, or nastier country that discourages most hunters. Think of blowdowns, doghair timber, or the steep, rocky side hills nobody wants to mess with. They use alternative routes. Instead of funneling through obvious saddles or benches, pressured elk start side hilling, dropping lower, or wrapping around drainages to avoid the main trails. They go quiet. Elk that have been bugled at nonstop for a week learn fast. That herd bull may still bugle occasionally, but he'll do it from the thick stuff or at night where he feels safe. Recognizing these adaptations is half the battle. If you're still hunting them like it's unpressured country, calling loud, following obvious routes, expecting them in easy meadows, you're hunting ghosts. Just like you study wind currents, you've got to study the currents of hunter behavior. Hunters are just as predictable as elk. Most guys park at the easiest trailhead, hike a mile or two in the dark, bugle their way up the main drainage, and either move too fast or call too much. By mid-morning, they're back at camp. If you can recognize that rhythm, you can start planning around it. For example, if you know hunters are pushing hard up a drainage before daylight, don't follow them. Slide in from a different access or wait until the pressure pushes elk into those side pockets and hunt those. If you hear 4 different bugles bouncing off the canyon walls, let those guys duke it out. Circle wide, cut into the terrain where you think the elk are escaping to. If you see trucks at every major pullout, look for smaller 2-tracks, overlooked ridges, or access points that require a little more bushwhacking. Just like you use the wind to position yourself for a shot, you can use pressure to position yourself for opportunity. Other hunters are constantly pushing elk, sometimes miles at a time, sometimes just over the next ridge. Instead of getting frustrated, ask yourself, if I were an elk in this situation, where would I go? Then put yourself there before the herd shows up. You can absolutely capitalize on elk that aren't responding vocally. They may come sneaking by because another hunter blew through the drainage and bumped them. In that scenario, don't call or chase. Read the pressure, slip into the funnel, and let the hunters move the elk for you. When you start thinking of pressure the same way you think of wind, as a constant force you have to account for, you stop fighting it and start using it. That's when you begin to separate yourself from the rest of the crowd. One of the first gut punch moments in a pressured elk unit is pulling up to your trailhead at 4:30 in the morning and realizing you're not early, you're late, and it's not yours. Headlamps bobbing up the trail, trucks jammed into every flat spot, and guys already slamming truck doors and bugling in the dark. It can make you feel like you're behind before your hunt even starts. But here's the truth. You can beat the crowd, or at least avoid it, if you start thinking differently about how you access your hunting area. Most hunters underestimate just how early they need to be moving. If shooting light is at 6:15, don't roll out of bed at 4:30. Elk and pressured units often move toward bedding hours before daylight. So if you're not in position by then in transition zones, you're already chasing tails. Getting up at 2:30 or 3 might sound extreme, but it gives you time to quietly slip into those transition zones while everyone else is still fumbling with their coffee. Elk that get pressured in the morning often slide into their beds before the sun's up. If you're waiting for legal light at the truck, you'll never catch up. Not every trailhead is created equal. Hunters are drawn to the biggest, best marked access points. That means if you're willing to do a little extra work with a topo map or satellite imagery, you can find overlooked ways in. Look for old 2-tracks that aren't on most maps anymore. Ridge access where you park on top and drop in instead of hiking up from the bottom. Creek bottoms where you can slip in quietly instead of skylining yourself on main ridges. Sometimes all it takes is parking a mile down the road and bushwhacking to the same drainage from a different angle to hunt elk without ever seeing another headlamp. This one's big. Most hunters go where it looks good. Meadows, benches, open timber. Elk in pressured units know this, and they slide into country that's steep, nasty, and full of blowdowns. The kind of places nobody wants to climb into. If you're willing to tackle that type of terrain, you'll find elk that feel safe. There will be days when you might pass several groups of hunters bugling their way up a drainage. Instead of following them, side hill into a deadfall mess where few people go. That's often where elk will be bedded in the thick stuff, or at least heading there. I don't recommend hunting them while they're bedded in it, but get there ahead of time and try to catch them in those transition zones. Right? Catch them in that thick stuff. Listen to the circus from a safe distance. Put yourself where the elk want to be. You don't always need to go miles deeper to get away from those people. Sometimes it's as simple as taking the opposite side of a ridge, dropping 500 feet lower than everyone else, or walking a half mile further down a 2-track before cutting in. Elk recognize where the pressure is thickest, and tiny shifts in your access strategy can put you back into the game. In pressured elk units, how you sound and how you move can either separate you from the herd of hunters or make you blend right in. The truth is, pressured elk don't just get wary of predators, they get wary of people who become predators. And when half a dozen bugle tubes are echoing up and down the drainage, elk start to recognize the difference between real communication and hunter noise. Aggressive calling in pressured units usually calls in more hunters than elk. Bulls that have been hammered by bugles for a week straight get conditioned. Instead of charging in, they grab their cows and head for the thickest, nastiest hole they can find. The cows have seen this play out enough to know that loud, repetitive bugles often equal danger, so they'll steer the herd away. That doesn't mean bugling is off the table. It just means you need to use it differently. Instead of firing off every 5 minutes, think like an elk. Ask yourself, what's the reason for this call? What do I want it to accomplish? If it's just to locate, use it sparingly. If it's to challenge, make sure you're in the right spot with the wind and set up perfect and you're close enough because you might only get one chance. Soft cow calls, small mews, or even raking a tree often work better than blasting a bugle in high-pressure units. Elk are social animals, and pressured elk often rely on quiet, subtle communication within the herd. Mimicking that puts you on their wavelength, not on the hunters. Bulls will often come in silent to nothing more than a couple of soft mews spaced out over 10 minutes. Most hunters don't have the patience for that. They get antsy and blow the bugle tube. But when you slow down and keep it subtle, you sound less like a guy hunting and more like the real thing. Another mistake in pressured units is hunters covering too much ground too fast. You'll see guys march up the main trail bugling every 200 yards and wonder why nothing's responding. Elk aren't dumb. If they hear a herd moving at 4 miles per hour up the drainage, bugling nonstop, they know it doesn't add up. It's not right. It's not natural. Instead, think like a predator. Slow down. Move with intent. Set up more often and give your calling a chance to work. Still hunting through the timber with patience can put you in bow range of a bull slipping away from other hunters without ever making a sound. In pressured units, timing matters more than volume. If you rip a bugle at daylight when 4 other hunters are doing the same thing, you're just adding noise to the mix. But if you slip into a pocket mid-morning when things have quieted down and softly cow call, you're the only herd they hear. That's when pressured bulls let their guard down. One of my favorite tricks in pressured country is making noise that elk expect, but hunters rarely think to imitate. Raking trees with a stick or your bugle tube, shuffling brush like a cow feeding, breaking branches softly as you move instead of being silent like a ninja. These sounds add realism to your setup and can make a pressured bull feel safe enough to check you out, often slipping in quiet, so you've got to be ready. In a heavily pressured over-the-counter unit, for instance, if the drainage sounds like a marching band of bugle tubes at daylight, a smart move is often to side hill into a small bench, rake a tree, and give 2 soft cow mews. Within minutes, a silent bull may sneak in, ears twitching, looking for that herd. He may never make a peep, but he can end up inside bow range without you ever bugling. That's the difference. When everyone else is trying to out-bugle each other, you've got to sound like the elk that aren't saying much. One of the biggest myths about pressured elk hunting is that the only way to escape hunters is to go deeper. And sure, sometimes that works. If you're willing to strap on a heavy pack and push 8 to 10 miles into the backcountry, you can find elk that don't see as much pressure. But here's the reality. Deeper isn't always better, right? Sometimes going smarter beats going further, because you're going to still have to pack that animal out, right? So think about that ahead of time. It's cool to go far when there's no elk on your back. Let's start with the obvious here. If you're in good shape, have the gear, and know how to handle a pack out, going further can pay off. Most hunters won't commit to more than 2 or 3 miles from the road. If you can comfortably double that distance, you'll often cut the hunting pressure down dramatically. Elk living in those deep basins or remote ridges often behave more naturally. They bugle longer into the morning, they move more openly, and they're less conditioned to non-stop calling. If you've got the grit to bivvy out and the ability to get meat packed without spoiling, this approach can open up great opportunities. But here's the warning. A deep hunt isn't a guarantee. You can hike 10 miles and still run into other hunters who had the same idea. Or you might burn yourself out on the pack in only to find sign that's a week old. Going further can be a tool, but it shouldn't be your only one. Now let's flip it. Some of the best bulls I've taken haven't been miles deep. They've been within a mile of the road, but in spots most guys overlook. Why? Because hunters are creatures of habit. They walk the main trails, bugle from the same ridges, and glass the obvious meadows. Elk know this. In pressured units, they often bed down close to the road in thick pockets where nobody bothers to look. Think about it. If elk get bumped by hunters marching into the backcountry, where's the safest place for them to slide? Often, it's the gnarly north-facing timber 800 yards off the road. Most hunters blow right past it in the dark. That's where pressured elk hole up. I call these overlooked zones. They're not glamorous. They might be dog-hair timber, steep side hills, or patches of oak brush that nobody wants to fight through. But those are the exact places pressured elk seek out. The sweet spot is combining both. Push in further when the sign and pressure tell you it's worth it, but also work the overlooked areas close to access. Be flexible. If you hike 5 miles in and find boot tracks at every wallow, don't stubbornly stick it out. Slide back toward the front country and hunt smarter. It's common to pack deep expecting solitude and then discover multiple camps within a mile. If that happens, consider pivoting. Pull back to a patch of blowdown near a road crossing and check for fresh sign. Elk often bed tight and move at night to avoid the deeper canyon circus. 2 days of that adjustment can put a bull in front of you that most hunters literally walk past. Here are a couple of guidelines for you. Go further when pressure is highest at the trailheads and you're prepared for the pack out. Go smarter when the sign tells you elk are using escape cover close by. Be adaptable enough to do either, depending on the situation. In pressured archery units, it's not about how tough you are, while that helps. It's about how smart you are. Most bow hunters see other hunters as nothing but competition. They get frustrated when they hear a bugle across the ridge or see another headlamp in the dark. But here's the truth. In pressured units, those hunters can become one of your best tools if you know how to use them. Every time a hunter bugles, still hunts through a drainage, or pushes too aggressively, they're moving elk. Bulls don't just vanish, they respond to the disturbance by slipping into pockets, changing direction, or pulling their cows into escape routes. If you can predict where they'll go, you can set up and let someone else do the heavy lifting. You can tag bulls you never call to simply by positioning yourself where another hunter is likely to push elk. They won't even know they helped you. By blowing out a drainage, they can funnel elk right into your lap. Think about terrain the same way you would if you were setting up for a white-tailed deer funnel. Where do elk naturally get pinched when they get pushed? In pressured units, those escape routes become money. Narrow saddles between drainages, benches that lead to thicker timber, ridges that connect feeding zones to bedding zones, creek bottoms that offer cover and a quick exit. When you hear other hunters hammering bugles on one side of a drainage, don't join the calling contest. Circle wide, slip into one of those escape routes and wait. Elk often come sneaking through, nervous but still moving naturally, and you're sitting right where they need to go. Other hunters typically burn the woods up in the early morning and late evening. Use that rhythm to your advantage. If you know a drainage is crawling with people at daylight, don't drive in with them. Wait an hour, then slip into the cover on the edges. By then, the elk have already been bumped and you're hunting the routes they use to settle into safer ground. Waiting until mid-morning lull when many hunters are hiking out for breakfast can also be an ideal time to move into pressured areas. By then, the elk are already adjusting and you can be the only one in position when they make that shift. Here's a trick that saved more than a few hunts for me. Learn to recognize the difference between elk sounds and hunter sounds. Hunters tend to bugle from high ridges, evenly spaced with the same cadence. Real bulls bugle with emotion, often from down in the cover into some nasty hole, and they don't keep a rhythm like a metronome. When you realize it's a hunter bugling across the drainage, you don't get discouraged, you get strategic. Ask yourself, if I were a bull with cows, where would I go to get away from that noise? Then move quietly in that direction and be ready. If you're shadowing a herd bull that has gone quiet and you suddenly hear a string of locator bugles behind you, assume that pressure is about to escalate. Hustle a few hundred yards ahead to a known saddle or travel route the elk have been using before. Minutes later, you may see cows filtering through, followed by the herd bull, all because you let that incoming pressure do the work while you made an adjustment. The shift in thinking is simple, but powerful. Don't see other hunters just as the end of your hunt. See them as pieces on the chessboard. You can't control where they go or how they hunt, but you can predict how elk will react to them. If you're willing to play that game, the crowd becomes an asset, not just a curse. In pressured elk units, the mountain isn't just full of elk, it's full of people. And when hunters are stacked into the same drainages, how you handle those encounters can make or break not only your hunt, but also your reputation. Archery elk hunting already puts us in close quarters with other hunters, and in high pressured areas, those encounters are inevitable. The mountains are public, which means no one owns a spot, but respect goes a long way. If you roll into a drainage and see another truck already parked there, consider moving to another access point. If you bump into another hunter working a herd, back out and give them space. There's nothing that kills the vibe of a hunt faster than guys competing for the same bull with bugles 100 yards apart. I like to apply the reverse rule. Treat every hunter you meet the way you'd want them to treat you if the roles were flipped. That mindset not only avoids conflict, it also keeps the hunting community stronger. Sometimes you'll set up on a herd and hear another bugle cut you off from above. Instead of getting mad, use it as a chance to reposition. Maybe the other hunter blows it and pushes the herd your way. Or maybe it's a sign that the elk you were chasing are about to get bumped and you should swing to a travel corridor instead. The point is, your hunt isn't ruined just because someone else is there. Public land means adapting, not quitting. One overlooked benefit of handling these situations with respect is that it builds relationships. You may meet great hunting partners because you chose to shake hands at a trail junction instead of throwing a fit. Sometimes you even gain intel. A hunter heading out of a drainage might tip you off to fresh sign or a bull he couldn't get close to. You never know when a respectful interaction will open doors for future opportunities. And at the very least, it keeps the hunt enjoyable instead of stressful. Public land hunting is a marathon. You're gonna see these guys again, maybe this season, maybe next, maybe in town. Building a reputation as someone who respects others, hunts ethically, and stays safe makes the whole experience better. And let's be honest, hunting is hard enough without wasting energy on conflict that doesn't put elk in bow range. Hunting elk in pressured public land units isn't easy. You're not just chasing elk, you're navigating people, noise, trucks, and every bit of pressure that comes with do-it-yourself archery hunts. But here's the bottom line. Pressured elk are still elk. They don't vanish, they adapt. And if you're willing to adapt right alongside them in your mindset, in how you read pressure, in the way you move, call, and access the mountain, you can still find success when most hunters throw in the towel. The difference maker is how you approach it. Do you get frustrated when you see other headlamps? Or do you use the pressure to figure out where elk are slipping away? Do you hunt like everyone else? Or do you slow down, stay patient, and think like an elk that's learned how to survive the circus? If you want to keep sharpening your edge, your mindset, and your strategy, and your ability to hunt relentlessly, I'd like to invite you to step into Team Backbone. Inside, you're going to get access to member-only digital content, training, strategy guides, fitness program, exclusive gear discounts, and a private community of like-minded hunters who live for the challenge just like you. You'll also get direct access to me for advice, feedback, and real talk on how to train harder and hunt smarter. If you're tired of hunting like the crowd and want to take your game to the next level, join us at Team Backbone. You'll find all the details at backboneunlimited.com under our membership tab. Thanks for being here. Until next time, train harder, hunt smarter, and never settle.